Alright, good afternoon everyone. This is my attempt at giving you some feedback on one of the questions that you sent in to me recently. I hope everything is okay with everyone. I hope everyone's safe. I hope everyone's healthy. But it's important that we keep working. It's important that we keep to a routine. And as part of that, I'm going to give you some feedback on one of the questions that I asked you to do. So the question I'm going to go through is this one: compare Alfred the Great and Henry V. How are they similar? Now this is an 8-mark question, obviously, so 8-mark question makes you think straight away. We need 2 paragraphs, 2 points, 2 kind of bits of own knowledge, and 2 links back to the question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through how I would answer the question, and then I'll have a look at some of the answers that were sent in to me. So let's start off. So remember, the question asks specifically how are they similar. It's not asking how they are different, it's asking how they are similar. So we need to make sure that when we're writing and answering this question, we are focused on how they are similar. So let's have a look at the factors that I thought. Obviously, Alfred the Great, he is the Anglo-Saxon king that helped fight off the Great Heathen Army. He was a really important king. That's why he gets given the nickname the Great. Henry V was one of the English kings during the 100 Years' War. He wasn't the king at the end, he wasn't the king at the beginning, but he was the king who won the Battle of Agincourt in 1415, and that makes him significant. Okay, so what similarities do I find? My 2 big similarities. The first one is that they were both winners of famous battles. Alfred the Great won the Battle of Edington in 878, and he defeated the Great Heathen Army. Now, Henry V, as we've just said, he won the Battle of Agincourt in 1415, which is considered to be one of the greatest military victories in British military history. The English army were outnumbered 3-1. We have 30,000 French against 11,000 English, and the longbow was the weapon that really won the day for him. My second point, so second similarity, is about English identity. Both kings are so important for helping form some sense of English identity. Let's have a look first at Alfred the Great. Alfred the Great, we say that he joined together other kingdoms in England. Why? Alfred the Great, he was the last king, the King of Wessex, the last kind of Anglo-Saxon king to not be defeated by the Vikings. The Great Heathen Army had arrived in Britain to get revenge for Ragnar Lodbrok after he was thrown into a pit of snakes. They kind of rampage through Mercia. They kill King Ael, splice his back open. They give him the old Red Eagle. All right, and then they head down. They hit London. They hit Essex. They hit Kent, and the last part of the country that's not taken over by the Vikings is Wessex, and it's Alfred the Great that leads the fight against the Anglo-Saxons. Sorry, against the Vikings, and he's the one that pushes the Vikings and stops the Vikings from taking over the whole of the country. So after this victory, this is a great victory for the English, and he unites the country. Under the religion of Christianity, but a lot of the previous kingdoms that were controlled by individual kings, they started to swear allegiance to Alfred, and they saw him as the King of England. So they started to see themselves as English rather than just Anglo-Saxon. And as I said, he united the country under Christianity. Now, Henry V, obviously, he is remembered. He is a king that goes down in history for being remembered, and a lot of you got it right. He's celebrated for his adoption of the English language. English language is started to be used at this time. Why? Because people hate the French so much. They want to create a difference between them and the French by having their own language. So Henry V is the first English king to start really speaking English. All the other ones previously had spoken French. So it was a celebrated victory that created a sense of Britishness. They started to forge their own identity as the French being the enemy. A lot of that came through in the language. It was a sense of, with Henry V, it was about being apart from Europe, not a part of it. So they saw themselves as separate from Europe now, which obviously is really relevant in 2020. But Henry V started to see England as not just being part of Europe, but being apart from it. And obviously the later works of Shakespeare, especially the play Henry V, obviously celebrates the life of Henry, creates this sense of Britishness, you know, the imagery, the language, band of brothers, we lucky few, happy few, and it's this kind of occasion, it's this great sense of being British. Any victory, whether it's sporting today, it brings the country together, okay, because they're proud of their heritage. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump straight into some of the answers. Now, I've taken 5 answers. I haven't put the names on there, okay, and I can't actually remember whose each one belongs to right now. I've got it somewhere separately. But we're going to go through each answer, and I'm just going to give you some feedback on what I thought was good and what we can improve. So let's have a look at the first one. The first one says, Alfred the Great and Henry V were similar in their conflict against another nation, which were both a win. For example, Alfred the Great won the Battle of Edington, which removed Viking rule in the country, strengthening England by uniting the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms under his rule. Similarly, Henry V fought against the French in the final Battle of Agincourt, where the French outnumbered the English 24,000 French to 6,000 English. For the first time, Henry V spoke English in his speech to unite England in the fight against the French. These wins determined the future of England. Britain, as if they succumbed to their opposition, there would have been no empire, and it was because of these wins it brought country unity. Now, that's a really, it's accurate. There are very accurate parts of that, but I really think that the person that's written this needs to focus on just one point per paragraph. So in this point, in this paragraph, we've got this whole section about them being both winning. We've got that here, and then we've got this bit, and it's kind of thrown in, and it doesn't link to the point that he's making. So the use of the second point, yes, the English started to speak English, but it pulls away from the previous point that's been made, which is that they're both kind of major military victories. So this second point, the one about Henry V speaking English, takes away from the first point. And what it means is because you've put 2 points in the first paragraph, then it kind of weakens, in some cases it could weaken your second point. And the second point, although they both won the wars, they ended up losing what they created. For example, Ethelred the Unready lost power, which was taken by Falkbeard following the St. Brice's Day massacre. I mean, Ethelred the Unready is about 3 generations after Alfred, so although that point is accurate, it's not linked enough to Alfred for me. And Joan of Arc had regained Gascony, Normandy, Aquitaine and Brittany following the Siege of Orleans. Yeah, no, Joan of Arc was really important, but she didn't take those areas. Those areas were taken back by France. Joan of Arc was really the symbolic kind of head of it, and before the war had finished, she was actually, arrested and burnt at the stake for witchcraft. So she's not as influential in terms of what she physically did, but she is still very important. These 2 major events paved the way for new development in the start of the empire, such as King Canute's North Sea Empire and Britain's expansion to the west. That is an incredibly good point, but it isn't linked enough to your previous point that you've made. So your link, although is excellent because it does talk about the expansion to the west, it does talk about the North Sea Empire, and that's really specific, it's not actually linked to the rest of the paragraph. So although that last bit is really good, it just needs more. It just needs a little bit more to help you get more marks. Let's have a look at the second one. Alfred the Great and Henry V are similar. I know this because both developed a sense of English identity. Alfred the Great got the English to unite together against the Vikings. This developed English identity because during the time the Vikings were in control of England, they had no identity. By uniting England, it created an identity. Henry V encouraged people to unite against the French. Henry V was the first monarch to use English instead of French, helping develop an English identity. This is why Alfred the Great and Henry V are similar, as they both developed a sense of English identity. That's a good paragraph. It includes lots of kind of own knowledge. Maybe the own knowledge could be a bit more specific, talking about how Henry V was able to encourage people to unite against the French with that important victory. Alfred the Great, what did he do to develop that English identity? The point is strong. The link at the end, I think, could be a lot stronger. It could really kind of reinforce your argument. It's kind of just stating the obvious again, which I think, although it'll get you up to that over half marks, to get that last 2 marks to the eight mark question, you need to be really hammering home your point. Now, the second point, it just doesn't have enough facts in it. It's just a bit too simple. So Alfred the Great and Henry V are similar. I know this because both won significant battles. Alfred the Great won the Battle of Edington. This meant that he can stop the Viking invasion. Henry V won the Battle of Agincourt. This secured Britain's control over France during the 100 Years' War. This is why Alfred the Great and Henry V are similar, as they both won significant battles. Again, yes, you've talked about the 2 battles, but you need to add more information. You need to show the examiner that you know more, and you need to really get it down on the paper. Let's have a look at 3. Henry V is a significant leader in English identity. Alfred the Great also is a significant leader in English identity. They are both similar in many ways. One of the reasons why I say this is because both leaders united English people together. Henry V caused people to unite because of his crucial victories in the 100 Years' War, such as the win in the Battle of Agincourt. Alfred the Great managed to get the English to unite against the Vikings. I mean, yes, the point is sound, but we've made the same point about twice there, and we haven't actually added any more information. So it's really important that you add more facts, okay? So, how did Alfred get the English to unite? Talk about Christianity, talk about the Battle of Edington in more detail, talk about other kings swearing allegiance to Alfred just to beat the Vikings, who were the biggest kind of threat at the time. Second point, another way they were similar is because both leaders had intense rivalries. For example, King Alfred the Great opposed the Vikings raiding in England and spent money on fortresses to help defences. He also converted some Viking leaders to Christianity. Henry V fought against the French in order to expand his empire. During his reign, there were many clashes against the French. Again, it's just very generic. It's not specific enough, and it really needs to be. It really needs to be more specific. Okay, so you need to add more detail to it. You need to add facts. You need to add figures, and you need to kind of create more of an argument to show the examiner what you're attempting to do. Now, this is my first time doing this, and I have not talked about marks. Question number 3, I'd say, is probably around the half marks. It's probably about 4 marks. Question number 2 is about 5 out of 8, and question number 1, I'd say, is about 5 out of 8 as well, just because we're not being specific enough. We're not hitting the nail on the head. Let's have a look at number 4. Initially, a similarity between Henry V and Alfred the Great was both these individuals participated in conflict as a way of contributing to the British throne. This is clearly demonstrated as Alfred the Great ascended onto the throne through his succession in the conflicts against the Viking army led by Guthrum. Just a quick point there. Obviously, that's kind of almost it's incorrect. Alfred the Great doesn't ascend to the throne in his conflict against the Viking army. Obviously, he was king of Wessex before the Vikings arrived, and he was there as king before. It then says, and through his contributed by ending the Viking rule and reinstalling the Anglo-Saxon monarchy. I mean, there isn't really an Anglo-Saxon monarchy. Remember, England is still very much a separated country. It's him who brings it and creates kind of an Anglo-Saxon monarchy. So instead of reinstalling it, he's actually installing an Anglo-Saxon monarchy. So although the thinking is there, we're just not kind of, again, hitting the nail on the head, being really specific and writing it in. Similarly, Henry V participated in conflict in France during the 100 Years' War. This contributed by gaining some land in France and strengthening English control in France. Excellent, that's what he did. This is very apparent that both of these individuals are similar, as they both participate in conflict, to which would consequentially contribute to the British throne, ignition of British search for British colonies. That, we've added this little thing at the end, the ignition of British church for British colonies. That hasn't been talked about at all in this paragraph, and yet it's there at the bottom. So we need to be really careful about adding. We feel like we add things at the end to kind of hammer the point home, but what we're not doing is we're not talking about it. So you can't add something in that you haven't talked about through the rest of it. Especially again, being specific about Agincourt would give you more marks as well. Let's have a look at the second point. Moreover, another similarity, Henry V and Alfred the Great, was their contribution to the idea of British identity. Firstly, this notion was depicted by Alfred the Great, whom upon his succession onto the throne, he reunited all of the English kingdom under one Anglo-Saxon king. Yep, that's excellent. Which launched the idea of British identity as under Anglo-Saxon rule with one language. More to do with religion at this point, because the languages were a mix. The English language is more of a Henry V point. So united and the idea emerged. Similarly, Henry V expanded the idea of British identity by his victories. By his victories in France, more specifically the Battle of Agincourt, whereby the outnumbered English won unexpectedly, showing that God was on their side, as well as this increasing their strength and the idea of British identity. Okay, so again, another really important point there, something that helps reinforce the argument, but I think more detail is needed. Reunited under one king would be a really good point to make there. Again, another 5 out of 8. Let's have a look at the last one. So this is the last thing. We'll just zoom through this because I know that we're probably getting bored of my voice. So let's get it done. Alfred the Great and Henry V are very similar since they both promoted the idea of being English, and they did this both by winning decisive victories, the Battle of Agincourt and the Battle of Edington. This makes them similar as they both both through their leadership brought England into victory over the competition, thus promoting English identity. Alfred the Great united the different kingdoms behind him. In Wessex, Henry V encouraged the English to unite together against the French at the Battle of Agincourt through his speech, which made morale amongst English troops increase significantly. So that speech again is very Shakespearean. We're not actually sure how that speech went. I do think there are multiple points being made in there, but it still is a point that kind of all links together. The beginning links up to the end. Now, I'd say that makes your second point hard, it makes it difficult, but I've got to say the second point on this is really strong. They're also similar because in the long term, they would have a long lasting impact. For Alfred the Great, it is clear that he is remembered for his military might, as well as the fact he was able to convert the English leaders to Christianity, which intertwined relations for 100 years. Also with Henry V in the long term, he further intertwined French and English history through his military power, as his victory, as well as the others before him, forced the English to intertwine in history for a long time. So I like the point. Unfortunately, the supporting, and I like the fact that there's lots of supporting in there. But the issue is that some of the facts in there are just incorrect. So the 100 Years' War, when it ended, it didn't intertwine France any longer. Actually, Britain separated itself from France and started focusing west. So, again, I really like the point that's being attempted there. It's just, it just needs to link to that original point, and it needs to be accurate. Now, that is all of the work that I was submitted. I've chosen 5 out of all the ones that have been submitted to me. I know you did other questions for me again, which was really good. I just wanted to thank you for your efforts this week, and thank you for listening to this. Please send me any questions. You've got my email. And good luck with your work from this week. Please get it to me. Even if you can only do one question, get it sent to me, and I'll send another one of these out. All right, have a great week.